Broadcasting live from our studio in Boston, Solutions Review is proud to showcase HID Global in the Solutions Spotlight, an exclusive webinar event.
I'm Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review, and welcome to this Solutions Spotlight featuring HID Global. Digital certificates and digital signatures provide the building blocks to add privacy, authentication, and data integrity to online businesses. So today, we'll be focusing on public key infrastructure, or PKI, a system of technology combined with processes, policies, and certificates that encrypt electronic communications and data. The complexity of PKI and the need to get it right has given rise to new managed PKI-as-a-service solutions. And for the next hour, you'll get an inside look at one of the best from HID Global. And joining us to walk you through this solution is Scott Kern, Vice President, Customer and Technical Solutions at HID Global. Scott, thanks for being with us.
Hey, Doug. Nice to see you again.
Well, I'm really glad you're here because I'm going to learn a lot. This is and you're the perfect person to do it because your background, really, you've been at this for the better part of 20 years, really digging into PKI all the way back to IdenTrust back in the early 2000s.
Yeah, late 90s.
So walk us through a little bit about your background before we get going, and then I'll set expectations for everybody. But I'd love for everybody to get a little bit of a greater sense about where you're coming from and how you've arrived at this particular position.
Right. Okay. Well, sure. So, my background started, like we just mentioned, in the late 90s with a company called Digital Signature Trust. So DST, as it was known then, was the first licensed commercial certificate authority in the United States, based out of Salt Lake City, Utah. They were merged with IdenTrust, which was a global leader in really more financial services, policies, things like that, and a global PKI. So we kind of had the first licensed CA get together along with a globally recognized financial services focused firm. And that really built this foundation of what IdenTrust is today. From there, I kind of went through a variety of companies. Every one of them was either focused on delivering public key infrastructure services or were consuming those services as part of other products. And what became really clear is it's just too hard. When we were talking 20 years ago about this, the only people I would talk to were governments and huge multinationals. That was basically it. Now with the advent of things like Microsoft CA that showed up in the early 2000s just as part, of a Windows Active Directory environment, suddenly everybody was starting to use PKI, and that really highlighted, again, just how hard it is. You got to click through a screen. You suddenly had the ability to issue certificates within your network. Then came the management nightmare. Then came the one guy that understood it left. And you're kind of, the rest of the team is really left holding the bag, which just makes it a perfect solution as a managed service.
Yeah, so you're going to walk us through that. I want to set everybody's expectations. We are happy to take any questions that anybody has. We're going to save a little bit of time at the end for that QA with Scott to walk through, again, whatever you want to know more about. I'm going to have a few questions, I'm sure, along the way, so I might jump in. But really what I'm going to do, Scott, is turn this over to you. And let you go through. I know you've got a few slides you want to share and really a demo, which is, I think, going to be incredibly valuable to look at. So why don't you take it over? If I interrupt, excuse me. If my questions are maybe a little too rudimentary, excuse that as well. But I'm very curious to see this demonstration because this is something that we've been hearing a lot about. Totally agree. It's incredibly complex, and I know you guys have developed quite a solution. So I'll turn it over to you.
Excellent. Yeah, and please, questions are always Always appreciated. First, apologize for PowerPointing you, but really need to set some context with this. There are a few things that set us apart from some of the other solutions out on the market, and really, as complex as this subject is, and I know we have a really wide range of attendees here, just to your point, some of this will seem pretty rudimentary. Hopefully there's something here that everybody can kind of, pick up and will be some new information. Just quickly, as you saw in the video, HID Global, we're a leader in the physical and logical security space, focusing identity and access management, and have been for decades. This company is the most ubiquitous thing people know us for is that little white badge you use to get into a building. Right? That really set us up as a company to address our customers' logical security as well. So PKI is a natural part of that. It's a foundational security technology. It spans every vertical, right? Anybody that has a network, anybody that has a computer connected to the internet needs PKI in one form or another. So HID Global started to build this portfolio expertise within the company, first with the purchase of Identrus that I'd mentioned earlier back in 2014, and then Hydron ID, which is the company I came from back in 2019. And the platform that we've developed is this PKI-as-a-service. And what it's designed to do is be accessed from anywhere really on the planet and just make all the hard parts go away. I mean, one kind of question that probably somebody's asking out there is, what is PKI, right? And what PKI really is a framework that lets you securely authenticate two different parties in a transaction, right? So much like showing a driver's license to somebody on the TSA when you're trying to get through the airport. PKI lets you do this in a way that lets you share information openly without risk of compromise. So every PKI credential is made up of two keys that are mathematically related. Those two keys, one's private, and just like the word says, that's something that you need to protect. But then there's a public component of it that you can share out normally. You can just share it with anybody. And, in the people world, that would be things like secure email or signing, digital documents. In the enterprise network world, that's really machines talking to machines, right? Making sure the machines in your network that are talking to and consuming other services are actually supposed to and have the rights to do that. So the way that this is done is there's a private key, there's a public key, and with those two things, you can offer mutual authentication. So the broadest use case that everybody, on this webinar is going to be familiar with is online shopping, right? You see that little padlock in the corner. Well, what that padlock is representing is there is a private key on a server and a public key that it's pushed down to your system that secures that connection. And that's a great oversimplification of it, but that is where everybody kind of gets their first grounding in PKI. Everybody's experienced it, whether they really know it or not. Our overview, so, if we were sitting in a conference room, I'd get halfway through this, and this is where most people's eyes would probably glaze over just a little bit, right? Again, this is really such a complex offering. And even for us to offer this as a service and simplify it, we still have some complexity to deal with. And that's because with public key infrastructure, you do it for a really long time, right? This isn't something you just stand up for a couple of years and you're just done with it. And this is something that will generally live as long as the organization that's deploying it. So that takes a bunch of planning. And that planning takes place in a way that you kind of figure out what the use cases are, right? What use cases are relevant to your organization. And then we design this infrastructure around that to service that. And there are a lot of options, right? The kind of simplest one on the left-hand side of the screen here is this dedicated issuing CA service. And that's really meant for, organizations that are doing something like replacing an on-premise Microsoft CA, right? That thing has grown in complexity over the years and it's just consuming more resources when really that's not your organization's primary line of business, right? You're not in the business of hosting PKIs, we are. You're in the business of delivering your products and services to your customers. So that's a very, very common entry point and really is what we do the most of. This middle one is a little more complex, and it's really meant for larger organizations that have more developed trust requirements, right? This could be large-scale IoT deployments. This could be organizations issuing certificates to partners, many different models. But, this is like a government and military level security around a PKI, and we have some great services that fulfill those needs. And then lastly, on the right-hand side, again, kind of going back to that web browser padlock use case, we also offer trusted TLS or SSL certificates. And we do that in a way that's available with all of your private hosted certificates as well. So it really gives you a way to cover all of your internal systems with the private PKI side, as well as certificates that cover all of your external facing services, right? Websites, online shopping tools, whatever that happens to be. And that's all kind of wrapped up in this single platform at the bottom here, this account certificate manager. And that's something I'll be demoing for you today. So to kind of get into the meat of this, the role of PKI in enterprise security, every network is just made up of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of devices. The old days, it was pretty simple. It was servers and desktops, right? Now with the proliferation of cloud services, with the work from home paradigm that we're all in now, or seem to be in now, everybody has multiple devices, even as an employee, right? I've got a desktop, I've got a laptop, I've got a phone, I've got a tablet. These are all things that connect into the network. And they're all things that need a verifiable identity. And ideally, that verifiable identity is something that I don't constantly have to prove through entering, a password, right? And that becomes particularly important when you're talking about computers talking to other computers, which is really the bulk of processing. You want that to be a passwordless method, right? You don't want to be storing secrets on all of those systems. And then lastly, you want to make sure that all the communication that is happening between those endpoints, is encrypted, right? Keep out the bad guys, keep the bad guys from understanding what's going between your systems. And that's really what PKI offers. And it's the reason that PKI has been around for, 45 plus years now. And it's not going anywhere. If anything, it's growing considerably year over year. And that is because it's such a fundamental and foundational security technology. So automation integrations, everything I've set up to this point addresses just the security of things and having certificates in place. There's some difficulty getting those certificates where you need them, right? Again, with this proliferation of all these different devices that are available now and that need to be, wrapped up within a quality security plan, you can't just rely on like a user going to a website and downloading a digital certificate, right? You have to have ways to do that automatically. So while we have this hosted PKI-as-a-service, that encompasses data centers on multiple continents, takes advantage of cloud services, all the things so it can auto scale. If you couldn't get certs easily from that, and particularly from a machine standpoint, right? If machines couldn't just get those certs automatically, you have this problem of how do I roll out all of these certificates? Well, the way we address that is a number of integrations. And this is, this is a great marketing slide, right? It has a bunch of people's logos on it. This column here, the REST API, ACME, SCEP, EST, these are all certificate-aware protocols. And most of those have been around for quite a long time, right? They're fairly ubiquitous. Newer ones like ACME that came out of the Let's Encrypt space, is probably the kind of new kid on the block here, but is incredibly well supported and deployed throughout all the different kinds of technologies that you would actually use. So why I love these kinds of slides, because it gives you that high level of the platforms we cover, right? If you had Microsoft CA in-house and you've been taking advantage of what's called auto enrollment, well, if you move your service to the cloud, can you still do that? Answer is yes, very, very easily, right? Very, very simply, without having to manage stuff within your own network. But my issue with slides like this is, it doesn't really show what's going on. And, if you're a technology person, you end up being a little bit critical about slides like this, right? Because it doesn't really show you any detail. And that's why I like this slide, right? So this is really that same representation as the last one, but it kind of shows how those pieces fit together. So we're off here on the right. And again, this is multiple data centers housing multiple hardware security modules, which is a purpose-built security device just to manage issuing CA certificates for PKIs. We run a bunch of those in a bunch of different places, again, on multiple continents, right? And we can do this in a way that if you just need your data to stay in Europe, no problem, we have a service for that. If you need just your data to stay in the US, again, we have a service to cover that. But how do you connect into all of that? That's what's really nice is when you look at things like, I just mentioned auto enrollment, which is a replacement for kind of a Microsoft CA. Great thing about that is it just goes over the public internet over port 443, right? Which is just HTTPS. Very normal, very easy to configure from a firewall perspective. And it's always communication from your network talking to us. We're never talking directly into your network, right? Which means you're not having to open up ports and firewalls that we connect into, right? All the things just from a security perspective, you really don't want to be doing. And every connector that we have and every service that we support operates in this same model. So a use case I'm going to be touching on today is integrating Microsoft InTune with our service. So I'm going to show you how that's actually configured here in just a few minutes. So the demo today I'm going to focus a little bit of time on our account certificate manager. So this is really the, again, ubiquitous portal. Anybody that's offering PKI as a service, anybody that's offering, trusted TLS or SSL certificates is going to provide some sort of a web portal like this. And this is really, kind of the center for day-to-day events. What we're finding over time with our customers that are taking advantage of all the different types of automation that we can offer is you spend less and less time in this web portal, right? Which is a great thing because you want systems to request certificates on their own. You want them to renew those certificates on their own. And really, you just need a way to come in and see what's happening, right? Do some basic reporting, do kind of the onesie, twosie, manual requests that everybody seems to need to do occasionally. So we'll cover all of that and how that works. And then we're going to spend a little bit of time and show exactly how you would integrate this service with Microsoft InTune. So I chose InTune for this particular solution review because of the work from home explosion. So what we've seen since really, let's just call it 3 or 4 months into the pandemic, obviously was this shift to nobody going into the office. And that presented a very large problem for most security organizations, right? Suddenly you had users that you were managing within a physical space, right? That you controlled your office environment. You had an office network, people badged into it, they sat at their desk, they logged in, they may have done some sort of a challenge, but you knew their physical location, right? You could lock things down pretty easily. With the pandemic happening, work from home exploding, that just totally was turned upside down. And one of the solutions available from Microsoft to allow companies to manage employee devices outside of that physical office environment was Microsoft InTune. And I'd say, it was fairly popular before the pandemic, but a few months into it, it really became clear that this was a solution that so many Microsoft Active Directory customers were moving to. And our service has a very tight integration into it. So in the old days, to configure something like this, you had to stand up a bunch of services inside so that this could talk to your on-premise Microsoft CA. With a PKI as a service, there is none of that configuration. So literally, to stand this up for our customers, it's an hour phone call. And we're on the phone with you during that, right? We want to actually kind of walk you through all the different steps. I'll show you the full process here in just a second. But it follows just all the standard Microsoft flow. Really, any of the CAs that integrate have to follow the same sort of integration and flow. So security is excellent. Again, we're an approved Microsoft partner for this, which just makes it all really easy and well documented and supported. Oh, did it again. So I'm going to actually jump out here from PowerPoint and show you what this actually looks like in practice.
Scott, while you're bringing that up, I wanted to just jump in because the InTune reference that you're going to get into here, I think, is spot on. What we're seeing here at Solutions Review is InTune really making, not only is it becoming kind of pandemic driven, but I think it's also becoming cost driven. I think a lot of folks have started to migrate to InTune based upon moving away from other MDMs, other mobility solutions, and so I think it's great. Now, would you say this? I know there's some limitations around InTune as a mobility management solution. Is this designed to essentially tighten that up a little bit in terms of security?
So it definitely does, right? Because it enables an organization to identify a group of devices and manage them without user intervention, right? So whenever you're relying on the user, we're all just people, things fall through the cracks, right? So it's not great to base your security on something that requires a person to do a particular thing. With InTune as a platform with support for Windows 10 plus devices, which covers all your laptops, things like that, and then support for iOS devices, Android. You really can cover that full spectrum of devices that your employees may be using as part of their job without them having to do anything really different. And that's really the key to this whole thing, right? We said it earlier with automation. It's like the machines need to be empowered to do this on behalf of the user. And InTune gives a great platform to be able to do that.
Excellent. Thanks. I'll let you carry on.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and log in. This is our production system. This is actually the account that we use to manage, our own PKI-as-a-service for our own consumption and power some of our network. But it's the same view that our customers have, right? So you first log into it. It's a very simple dashboard, just to give you some basic usage of what's going on, right? For us, we issue certificates live as part of our monitoring process. So we deliver another dashboard besides this one, just that shows all the different services that make up this PKI-as-a-service platform and give you a live status as to, are there any issues with those things? And the way we do that is we actually issue real certificates. We validate those real certificates. We revoke certificates. We check CRLs. We check OCSP, right? Constantly. So our part of the platform here is really issuing certificates that support that type of monitoring. Another great feature of this dashboard, and really what most of the customers come here for, is expiring certificates, right? If things aren't fully automated, fully renewing on their own, there's still some manual processes. You have to have some way to track what is expiring within your environment. And we support, again, like everybody else, we support sending notifications out to certificate owners when things are going to expire. And we give the ability to let you set what frequency you want those reminders to be sent out at. By default, it's this 30, 15, 5 days before. But that can easily be 90, 60, 30, 15, 5, 3, 1, right? However you wanted to configure that. And then what's also nice is it's really simple. You click the bar, it brings up the list of the certificates that are expiring that you're responsible for. And then, you simply click on that and hit the renew certificate flow and have a new certificate issued, very, very simply. Again, we push automation as much as possible, right? But for those servers that you do need to manage manually, and I'll tell you one of the big ones is, if you're using external services like Cloudflare, some of the other content delivery networks, a lot of times you're having to supply these certificates, right? There isn't necessarily automation there. And those are mission critical systems for just about everybody. So having a very strong way to track the expiration of certificates, having a very easy way to renew those certificates, is just critical for the platform. Moving on down, I'm just going to hit accounts. So with the automation, all of it requires some configuration against your account. And one of the key things that really is needed there is identifiers of the type of certificates that you're going to issue. So we show InTune here in just a little bit. See there's an InTune organization. There's a specific policy, specific certificate type that we're pushing, just to our own devices. It lives for 7 days. It gets renewed automatically. And in order to configure it within InTune, you need some information, and this is the place to get it, right? So this policy ID becomes pretty critical. And I'll show you that here again in just a little bit. Whole goal here is that this is just the place that contains all the information that you need to essentially do your job. So viewing certificates, again, really good place to generate reports, things like that. You can look for many different types of functions here. You can look for just certs that are expiring. You can look for certs that have expired, certs that failed during the issuance process. All that's available from a single screen. The request process, this is what everybody's going to use occasionally, right? So talking about certificates that are available for your external, your web-facing properties. It's probably important here to note, we are Identrust, right? As part of HID Global, we operate our own trusted CAs, right? That are used all around the world. We actually also offer DigiCert certificates through the same platform. So we have customers, and we as an organization embrace, you don't necessarily always want to rely on a single vendor. So with a single contract through us, you actually can have both a primary vendor, which is Identrust for your main certificates, and then have a built-in backup going to DigiCert for trusted TLS certificates as well. And that just gives some flexibility, right? But one part of this too, if I just, if I'm going to issue certificates, I'm going to choose the policy. See the Identrust ones here. I'm just going to choose a default one. I'm going to do a dummy request just to show you the next screen. And basically, this would be me requesting a trusted TLS certificate. Because it is trusted, I need to register my domains, right? I can't issue a certificate for some other customer. I can only issue certificates against domains that I can prove that I manage. I'll show you how that works here in just a second too. But this single interface lets you do all of your internal private certificates as well as your publicly trusted. One single place to track everything. This upload feature. So when customers are coming over to our service, it's really rare that this is the first time they've ever used certificates, right? Could be a startup. That may be the only reason. Everybody else has been using certificates from some other process, be that an internally hosted CA, and or another third-party trusted CA issuer, someone like DigiCert. This gives an easy way if there are some certificates they want to continue to track from the old platform they're migrating from, you can actually upload them into the system and we can start to track all that expiration as well. Certificate authorities, this would just list all the different ones that we do for you. I'm not going to show that particular one on this because this is our infrastructure support for some of our other customers. And we'll just keep that part private for now. But if you were viewing it in your account, it would show you any of the private CAs that we had created on your behalf and that we're managing for you. And then it would also show you any of the trusted TLS CAs that are available under your account. This next feature, the request queue, we have quite a few clients that want to allow third parties to request certificates, kind of going back to like the content delivery network use case, right? There's a third party that needs certificates tied to your organization, this gives them a really easy way. So they just add those people as what's called a requester within the system. Any certificate that requester enters requires a secondary approval from an account admin or an organization admin within your company, right? So this lets you avoid sending certificates over email, right? Getting CSRs or certificate signing requests emailed to you, you logging in, pasting those, essentially doing a bunch of just the busy work. You can offload that onto your external party. They're doing it anyway, but still maintain control over what certificates get issued and the content that's within those. Next one down here is domains. So I mentioned, obviously, as a trusted certificate provider, we can only issue certificates to you for domains that you own, right? And again, this is more of a publicly trusted thing. On the private PKI-as-a-service, again, those are tied to your internal domain. They're not trusted anywhere outside of your network, right? So it's a little different story there. But for the trusted TLS integration, basically you have to prove that you own those domains before we can issue certs. What makes this a little bit unique is you just do this really once to start. You go through one validation process, which you can do here entirely online. Once that's available, you can issue as many certs as you need to against that. And that just saves you from having to, do this process every time you need a cert. Industry rules, we're all trusted CAs have to follow industry rules, and we ask you, actually we have to ask you to redo this operation, this vetting, at specific intervals depending on the types of certs that we're issuing for you. So the system tracks all that, automatically lets you know when you're getting close to the domain expiration, sends out reminders, hey, you need to come back in and revalidate this in order to keep issuing certificates against it. So again, we're trying to provide as much automation and support as possible so that things just flow when you need them. Users. So this is another screen that kind of ends up being used when you talk about configuring some of the third-party automations that we do. So like if I just clicked on mine, you generally need some sort of an API key, right, for most integrations. That's all self-service as well. It's just available from your particular user account. We support a bunch of different roles with different rights, depending on the job that you need to do. And that just supports that concept of least privilege, right? You don't want everybody to be an account admin and have, super rights over everything. And we give you some well-defined account types that let you manage that very, very easily. Then this is another simple place to, see what kind of authentication is required. We do support full SSO integration. So instead of having to use a, HID global issued credential to log into this portal, if you're doing something like, Azure AD, Okta, Ping Federate, Duo Security, any of those SSO providers, we can configure the system so that you're just using your normal corporate credential in order to access this system. And that makes the whole deprovisioning thing, right? When an employee leaves the company or moves to a new role, it's a very simple way for our customers to manage it without having to come in and manage users in yet another platform. Logs, pretty self-explanatory. You only really come here if something goes wrong, which happens occasionally, but we try to display as much as possible there for you. And then lastly, but very important, where do you go when you need help? So obviously we support answering the phone. We have a dedicated ACM support email that automatically opens tickets. We have a ticket portal, that's available to all of our customers. And then even just the manual, right? For everything that I've shown you here today, kind of as a walkthrough, you have the same ability to get this information at your fingertips anytime. Come in, you've got a particular thing you need to do that maybe you haven't done for a year. Pop in to help, walk through, you can see exactly, how to perform that particular operation. Hopefully that's all pretty straightforward. Again, from a how do I get certs, this is great if you're doing it one by one. We don't encourage anybody to do it one by one. So let's kind of dive into the Intune use case. So I'm going to actually go back to this PowerPoint slide again and just show really quickly here. So Intune obviously is its own service, right? It's contained within Azure, a Microsoft Azure Cloud Service. And there's a couple of parts to it. So, we have to stand up what essentially is a SCEP server for your account. And then it's the responsibility of our customers, right? Their Intune or endpoint manager admins to do a little bit of configuration here to tie the two together. So the way that starts is, we provide this walkthrough document, right? Tells you kind of how it flows, right? How do the two work together? Same picture that you just saw on the slide there. And then there's a couple of things that the Azure AD admin needs to do, right? And this is really to kick it off. So this is something that can be done just by the customer. We don't need to be on the phone for this, but we're more than happy to, but they can do this in advance. And really, this is just registering an app that represents the PKI-as-a-service that we're hosting on your behalf, right? So you can go through, do all this, send that information to us. We build our part of the service, and then we get on the phone together, right? And again, it's generally a 1-hour phone call. And that's just to walk through, ensure that all the rights were created or assigned correctly, permissions are there, and then configure the actual SCEP profile for the types of devices that you're going to use. Start to finish, so just to give a little bit of overall timing, when a customer goes live with us, to the time that, let's say, Intune was their first use case, there's basically a 2.5-week portion where we're building out your infrastructure. At the end of that, let's just say beginning of week 3, we do a walkthrough with you to the portal. We do an SSO integration if that's something that's desired. And then we would schedule that first phone call for the Intune integration. Again, that's 1 hour. As long as setup is correct on the Intune side, you're done. You're done in delivering certificates of that. So kind of from the time you say go to the time you're automatically managing Windows 10 devices, iOS devices, Android, if you're motivated, that's a 3.5-week exercise to enable all of that. Where we've already done the upfront infrastructure, let's say your next use case is auto enrollment. Well, that's another 1-hour phone call, right? That can be done the next day, the next week, whatever schedule works for you. So the kind of net here is, this is very, very low impact to your staff. And it's also low impact from, how much your staff really needs to know about PKI. That's kind of our job. Our job is to make that part easy, to be able to answer questions you have, and just support you. We kind of become your PKI team as part of this. So let me move over to what it actually looks like in Azure. Keeping an eye on time, we've just got about 5 more minutes worth of a demo here. So I'm in Azure. If I go into view the actual service, so this is what the admin on your side would do. They would come in and they would add a new app registration. Obviously, I've already done this because we have this. And just click on that. This is that information, the document that I would need, right? That you would be sending to us. We have a method for you to send that to us securely. Nothing private on this screen, so no concern there. But there's a client secret that you would provide to us out of band as well. Once we have that, again, we do the configuration on our side, get the SCEP server built up, create any certificate policies or profiles, depending on the types of devices that you want to manage and how you want to manage them and what you want to use them for. Biggest use case that customers are leveraging Intune for is passwordless authentication to their wireless networks, right? Particularly with the return to office that is still kind of going on. You don't want your users to come into, a space they haven't been in forever and have to go through this whole thing of calling the help desk, right, to get back on the network. They should just be able to show up and be on your wireless network seamlessly. So while getting on that wireless network is not one of our technologies, right, there's lots of solutions out there, things like Cisco ICE, that do that piece, they all require a certificate, right? And this is that method to get it. So these could be device certificates. These could be user certificates. They're both supported through here. So depending on what your downstream use case is, you might use just one of those, right? You might just need the device cert. You might need both of them. It really doesn't matter. This can push as many certificates as you need. And the way that that really looks is, so there's two parts, right? This was the Azure part that your Azure, kind of AD admin would have configured to get started. But then there's the endpoint manager side, right? And this is really, when you think about Intune, this is really where you're doing all the management of devices and people within your network. So if I just click on devices here quickly, you can see all the supported platforms: Windows, iPads, Mac OS, Android, all the ones you would expect. The piece that actually is working with the devices to generate those private keys, make the cert signing request, send that up through Intune to our service to get signed are these configuration profiles. And as you can see, I've got a bunch here. Some are, on the testing side, some of our production ones, and some just do things like push a root certificate down to the device. So that's really the root of trust, right? That's what tells your wireless network that they can trust the certificate that's being presented to them. So that gets configured as a separate push. And then there's the actual, device certificate itself. So I'm just going to show you what that configuration looks like. And this is really what that 1 hour phone call is doing is, we help you create all of this. We help you determine what the subject name looks like. That's important for your downstream, for VPNs, for wireless access. That generally needs to be formatted a certain way depending on what your solution is behind that. So we create all of that for you. We set things like the validity period, key sizes. We do industry standard best practices. So it's our job to keep up on all of that. We make recommendations of all of that as we go through it. So you don't have to spend a bunch of time researching this. That information comes from us. And then we provide you a URL to our backend service, which you can see this is acm.hydrogen.com. That was the ACM platform I was just on. And then this long string afterwards, which hopefully you can even see this, that represents the policy that it's going to be issuing a certificate from. So once this is done, it's just a matter of assigning groups, right? This is normal, really kind of AD stuff, which I think is one reason why Intune's become so popular. You've got a large population of Microsoft AD shops that understand the security model, right? Nothing new to learn, which is always a good thing, kind of in this game. And then any certs issued through here just end up showing, back in the portal. So you still have just a single place that you can come back in and manage and see all the certificates that were issued for any particular profile that we're happening to issue against. And that really concludes the live demo portion of this.
Well, actually, I want to make sure you have all the time you need. We could certainly go a little bit longer if there's other things that you'd like to show. But otherwise, we can certainly get to some questions.
Yeah, I've got a couple of wrap-up slides. I can touch on those first.
Sure.
Should we do that? So the featured benefits slide. I'm not going to read this to you because you can certainly read it, but what's almost more important is over here on the right-hand side. So throughout this entire presentation, it'd be a great drinking game, right? If someone would track the number of times I said automation. It's just that important. And what's also important to know is we don't do automation just against kind of industry standard protocols, right? Like SCAP, ACME, EST, or auto enrollment support. But we also support a bunch of third-party products. One of the big ones is the Venafi trust protection platform, right? We have an integration in that. So anybody, and this is generally focused more on larger organizations, but any customer that's invested in a full, certificate lifestyle or lifetime management platform, I totally botched that, a CLM, certificate lifecycle management platform, has PKI-as-a-service built into it, right? There's just a driver that's already available to point to our service. So it doesn't really matter where you as a customer are in your journey, right? If you're just really starting out, starting to take advantage of some of the cloud services out there, you were a Microsoft shop, so you started to mess around with Azure AD, we have integrations there. If you're a Mac shop, right? If you're something, and a bunch of our more, kind of technology focused customers, really aren't an Active Directory shop. There are a collection of Macs, Linux, a bunch of other platforms. Well, we have integrations for platforms like JAMF, right? That allow you to manage large populations of Mac OS devices, right? As well as other types of devices. That's all available as well. So what's really key with this service is it grows with you, right? And it changes with you. Again, one of the real benefits of PKI having been around for so long is that support for it is pretty much ubiquitous. And us as a PKI-as-a-service, our whole goal is just to kind of stay ahead of that curve, right? As new platforms come out, as new security challenges pop up on the horizon, our job is to make sure that we're ready and able to respond to those. Because again, this is what we do for a living, right? Where you're delivering products and services that your company focuses on. You shouldn't have to spend an inordinate amount of time tracking all of this stuff too. And that's really another thing that we bring to the table for you. And then lastly, I mean, this is the pitch slide, right? So again, let you guys kind of read it, but title to me says it all, right? You want to reduce that, oh dear. You want to reduce that operational complexity, right? And you want to reduce cost, right? You want to reduce the amount of resources you have working on this, but you don't want to reduce trust. So with our PKI-as-a-service, everything you put into it can be taken back out of it, right? So if you already have your own set of roots from a long-standing internal PKI and you want to leverage those in this service, there's no problem doing that. If we're generating all new root and issuing CAs for you, those root CAs last anywhere from 20 to 75 years. If you decide you want to go to another vendor at some point, you can actually take those with you, right? You're not locked into this service. And we think that's really key, right? We're not about vendor lock-in. We're about let's provide the best solution we can that meets your needs for as long as possible. And then I'm going to touch on the subscription thing because I think that's been a real game changer for our customers. This is just super simple. We figure out what you need for about a year. We charge you a subscription fee for it. If you happen to do way more certificates or you want to add new integrations during that year, there's generally just a true up process on your next cycle, right? What that prevents you from having to do is, cough up buying certs on corporate credit cards and all the kind of, financial bad behavior our customers have been forced to do in the past, because if they issue 100 certs and that's all they paid for, they're stuck. And then again, and there's just no cert-based pricing. There's no credits to manage. You can always add services. And that is really the end of my presentation.
Well, outstanding. Appreciate the presentation. Certainly appreciate the InTune angle. Some people are obviously asking about other solutions that they may already have with regard to endpoints. I know you mentioned some SSO solutions. Can you talk a little bit about how it works with other solutions?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. The integrations actually are really similar from an engagement point of view, right? So I mentioned auto enrollment as being one. That again is, you identify a use case. You would reach out to us if you're already a customer. Hey, I'm interested in doing this. We generally would have maybe a half an hour phone call or presentation, show you how that works and what your options are. And when you figured out that this meets your needs, again, you just schedule time with us. So we always try to have an expert on the phone with you, on a web meeting like this, when you're actually configuring a service, right? So that at the end of that hour phone call, you have auto enrollment or you have AirWatch enabled, right, for your external devices. Whatever the use case happens to be, it's really that same paradigm. And because this is a subscription service, you're not having to figure out how to pay for that the day you go live, right? You already have a contract. We're going to true up when it comes to your next cycle. Again, it's just really, really simple, and it cuts down just a bunch of that internal complexity of, how do I get money outside of budget years, right? People just don't. It just doesn't work that way anymore. So we just made that all go away.
And so, how does licensing work? Is licensing required for each managed device?
Yeah, that's a great question. Particularly if you have experience with some other vendors in this space, depending on the features they're delivering, it's really common to either have a certificate charge or a certificate and a device that cert is going to live on charge, right? And again, that equates to whatever type of service you're actually signing up for. With our platform, there is no per certificate charge, and there's no device charge, right? So even on the trusted CA side, you can put a cert on as many platforms as you want. You can add a bunch of sand fields to it. There's no additional charge. On the private side, we start every customer out at like a minimum of 10,000 certs, which for smaller organizations, that's tons. Our next level up is 50,000 certificates, right? And we want this to just spit certs as often as you need them for as many platforms as you need them, and not have to worry about, I've only got 20,000 available, and it's May and I'm at 19. What am I going to do? Right? Again, we just take that off. No extra licensing fees, no per cert charges.
Well, and with the amount of devices people are carrying these days, sometimes that could get a little out of hand as well, and hard to predict. Very interesting. So with regard to that implementation, one of the questions we have is around professional services for implementation. I know a lot of people see it. We always get great demos from very smart presenters, and it looks very easy. But what is the professional services available for implementation?
Yeah, so I mean, HID Global as a company, we have a large professional services arm. They don't do anything with our private PKI-as-a-service. And that's because the whole goal of this service was, when you sign up for it, right? When you become a customer, we deliver a service that at the end of that 3 to 4 weeks, that I talked about earlier, you have a working service, right? This is live in production, certificates being issued against devices to solve a specific set of use cases. Our whole view starting the company that was, purchased by HID Global was, it's ridiculous to buy something and then buy something else just to make that work, right? We wanted that to all go away, and that continues on this platform. Again, we just always engage with our customers around specific use cases. It's not just a general service. It's, I need to log in without a password to a wireless network, right? I need to support a VPN coming in from 20 different countries. I need to be able to securely sign emails, right? Whatever the use case is, that's what we're solving for. We're not just selling you a PKI.
We're getting questions with regard to that around scale, and if you can give us a sense for kind of, if the kind of max scales that you're dealing with particular clients. I mean, is there a sense for how many devices can be on the platform from any one engagement?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, if I look at our smallest customer, which is just, they buy 3 SSL certs a year, right? Through that portal. If I look at our largest customer, they're issuing millions of certificates a year, right? So the platform being a multi-tenant platform deployed through, all of our customer-facing interfaces are deployed through cloud services on multiple continents, right? Globally load balanced, auto scaling in most cases, all pointing back to dedicated colo facilities that HID Global manages the cages in, of where the private keys actually live, right? All these hardware security module devices, right? And those two are distributed in multiple continents. So the whole service, we have to support every single customer, just like we support hundreds of customers, right? So for us, we're always building. We're always building, building, and we'll always have a capacity that a single customer really, isn't going to reach on their own. So we do IoT, we do enterprise security, we do small web farms. I mean, we just do both ends of it from a scale perspective.
Well, so I want to dig down a little bit on that point around drivers and where you're seeing demand. There's certainly, I think, a process that everybody should probably be going through in advance of engaging with HID Global around their security risks, or what they assess to be their security risk. What are you seeing in terms of kind of non-negotiable security risks that are driving folks to give you a call?
Yeah, it's encryption everywhere, right? So the buzzword last few years has been zero trust, right? And it's zero trust because your employees aren't in a box, right? Your company, your enterprise doesn't live in a box. It lives everywhere. The pandemic really made that clear to most enterprises, right? You can have devices connecting from everywhere at any time. And the only way to protect those and to understand what's coming into you is to make sure those devices have identity and an ability to encrypt communications between them. And that's what PKI does.
Well, and I want to talk about that a little bit more, because what we're seeing, and certainly zero trust is something we're covering a lot of, and there's a lot of approaches to it. And I think there's a cultural war around the friction required to implement zero trust. I mean, speak a little bit to how you see this smoothing some of that out for the corporate decision makers.
Yeah. And again, I think that's really why InTune has become so popular over the last couple of years, right? Because it just gave companies that were already Microsoft customers a very simple avenue to automatically push devices or push certificates to devices that their employees are using with almost zero friction, right? Really, that device just has to show up on the network in order to be managed. And that's a huge win, right? That lets a very small IT staff manage hundreds, thousands, potentially millions of devices, right? Anywhere that they happen to be, not just a single physical location. And that has it's just turned it up. Everybody knows they should be encrypting. Now there's actually fairly easy ways to do that and fairly inexpensive ways.
So who do you seeing is the typical folks in an organization that you're engaging with? Who should get involved in this conversation before they, again, engage in this type of consideration cycle?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say most of our calls start out because someone, and it's usually the admins that are responsible for maintaining these certificates, have a problem, right? And they've talked to their CTO, their CISO, manager, whoever happens to be in that role. And first thing that they ask is, why are we doing this internally, right? There's a lot of ways you can outsource that. Let's start looking at that. And that starts the conversation, right? Obviously, as HID Global, we come up pretty quickly, tend to have some great first phone calls that turn into second phone calls and third phone calls and then a contract, right? It's pretty straightforward, but it's anybody that either is frustrated from having to maintain this type of a system, a PKI system internally, or knows they just need to support zero trust. They don't have the infrastructure to do that today, and they don't want to build it.
Excellent. Is there any advice you would offer to folks as they're thinking about their security posture that you could afford as we close?
Yeah, that's a big one, right? I mean, do your due diligence, right? There's quite a few vendors in this space. Again, we've been around forever, right? So there's a bunch of differentiation that mostly is doing the same thing, right? So it really pays to spend some time talking to different people in this space, getting comfortable with, who would be providing those services, look at track records, how long they've been in business, kind of the scale of their business, all of that. Because again, where this is such a foundational security technology, you certainly don't want to get it wrong. And these days, getting it wrong is easier to do if you're deploying your own internally than it is going to any of the outsourced PKI vendors. Because again, got a lot of skin in the game, doing this for a living, providing these services for our customers.
Well, that'll do it. Thanks very much for the time today, Scott. Very much appreciated. Great presentation, and we look forward to talking to you later in the year.
Well, Doug, thanks again. Thanks very much for having us.
So there you have it, another solution in our spotlight. We want to thank HID Global and Scott for that fine presentation, and we appreciate your attendance as well. Until next time, I'm Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review. Thanks for watching.